Hello, this is Pastor Nanette Christofferson from Love of Christ Lutheran Church, and we're beginning our new season in our church calendar year with the first Sunday of Lent. And that finds us in the Old Testament of Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 1 through 11. As we get ready to enter into the season of Lent in our Old Testament reading today, it really brings us back to remembering and to thinking about the Deuteronomy text of what a tithe is and offering our thanks to God. Lent is a season of reflection. It's a season of stopping and doing oftentimes a little more intentional prayer in our spiritual life. It's really a season of thinking about going deeper spiritually and what that might mean for each one of us as we look to the cross that's coming up at the end of our season of Lent. So we're going to get started today as we enter into this first Sunday of Lent, and we start off in the Old Testament reading of Deuteronomy. Let's look at a little bit of background on this. This passage that we read today is part of Moses' final instructions to the Israelites before they enter the Promised Land. It describes the ritual of offering the first fruits, a practice that reinforced the Israelite dependence on and gratitude to God. And I'm just going to repeat a little bit there because I think it's important that we remember this. It's a practice that reinforced the Israelites' dependence on and gratitude to God. Today's lesson is found near the end of the longest of these speeches in chapters 5 through 26. Here Moses revisits instructions for the celebration of the Feast of Weeks, which he first announced in chapter 16. The Israelites were to celebrate the first harvest in June by giving a free will offering in proportion to the blessings the Lord your God has given you. Now, in chapter 26, Moses provides the actual liturgy for that first fruits celebration ritual. And so that's what we hear some today, is that first fruits celebration ritual. So let's take a look at Deuteronomy 26, verses 1 through 5. When you have come to the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, and you possess it and settle in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from the land that your Lord your God is giving you. And you shall put it in a basket and go to the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling place in his name. You shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, Today I declare to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give us. When the priest takes the basket from your hand and sets it down before the altar of the Lord your God, you shall make this response before the Lord your God. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien, few in number, and there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. When the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us by imposing hard labor on us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. The Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power, and with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground that you, O Lord, have given me. You shall set it down before the Lord your God and bow down before the Lord your God. Then you, together with the Levites and the aliens who reside among you, shall celebrate with all the bounty that the Lord your God has given to you and to your house. So as we look back to the introduction, we need to remember this as a liturgy and as Moses is helping prepare the Israelites to enter into this land of milk and honey. So maybe you can picture the worshiping Israelites standing in the Yahweh sanctuary, holding a basket filled with harvest, or filled with yield from the harvest. As the priest receives the basket and lays it down in front of the altar, we can hear the worshiping Israelite offer the liturgical recitation along with the first fruits. As we look to the words, the resuscitation reviews the saving actions of God, reaching back through the story of the ancestors. And I think it's important, I'm just going to stop and pause here before we go into what this recitation involves, is I think it's important to remember that God is always, or Moses is always reminding his people, God's people, to remember God and what God has done for them. And so they start off by remembering their initial homelessness. A wandering Aramean was my father, and this would be talking about Abraham. Their migration to Egypt, they lived there as an alien. Their suffering there and how harshly they eventually were treated and afflicted. Their cry to God for redemption, and then the redemption out of enslavement that the Lord brought them out of. And now finally, they're settling into a fertile land that will be flowing with milk and honey. So what does it mean to be the people of God? During this first fruits ritual, the worshiping Israelite holds the first fruits of the bountiful land upon which he stands in worship. In that physical stance, the worshiping Israelite is a living testimony that God has been faithful to the promise made from the very first divine encounter with the ancestors. Go to the land I will show you, and there I will bless you. These are words that God said to Abraham in Genesis 12, 1 through 3. During this ritual, the worshiping Israelite identifies with the ancestors conspicuously, not according to any power of glory attributed to them, but rather in their powerlessness. More than anything else, God does. And that's what this liturgy is showing, that this has been God in their lives. It is God who has done these things, recognizing that God has helped in this bountiful harvest that they have as well. God is in and around and through everything, a transcendent God. The liturgy celebrates the faithfulness of God as it is manifest in the rescue of the powerless. So let's take a look at a few questions on this text. Maybe there's some questions you had yourself as well. Why was it important for the Israelites to bring the first fruits to God rather than using them for themselves? I think that's a great question because so often we don't think of the first fruits that we have, the things that we, like the money that we have as a first fruit to God. And a lot of times we don't even want to think that it was God that helped us with that, earn that money. We want to think it's our money. But by giving their first fruits to God, it offered them a thankfulness. It made them think beyond themselves. It made them go back to the Creator and realize that all of this is because of God. The food that they have on their plate is because of God and what God is doing in their lives. So what does the historical confession in verses 5 through 10 teach us about remembering and retelling our faith story? Well, if we look to this, we see how important it is that we do not forget, right? That, we can go through our holidays of Christmas and Easter, we can go through the season of Lent and never even think once about what it might be about or what it might mean to us in our faith. We can go through Christmas without sharing the story of Jesus being born. We can go into Lent without reflecting and looking deeper into our spiritual life. And we can go to Easter and not even think about what Easter means. And when we do that, then we're not remembering to tell our story, to tell our faith story. And it's something that needs to be told again and again and again. Why? Well, as I reminded people at Thanksgiving, we are a forgetful people. And as we look to God and his work with the Egyptians or with the Israelites in the desert and in the wandering, we can be a stiff-necked people as well. Question number 3. How does the command to include the Levites and resident aliens in the celebration reflect God's justice and care for the marginalized? So part of the tradition of remembering the Levites and bringing the food to, in this case, it might have been the temple, but wherever they set up where they worship, was to help provide for the Levites, who were not allowed to farm and grow food because they were busy ministering to the Israelites. And so this is a way that God was able to provide for them. And also This was a way to provide not only for the Levites, but also for the widows and those who are marginalized as well. Well, as we enter into the season of Lent, I pray that you have time to stop, to question, but also to grow deeper in God's word. Blessings on your Lenten journey.